playing soccer with a live bomb, failing to fight off a knife-wielding chicken, or death by hot dog. Sounds to me like some Darwin Award winners. So buckle in as we break down more of the most embarrassingly stupid ways people have died. In 1999, a man was mysteriously found dead by maintenance workers in London, lying beside some train tracks. Curiously, the only injuries to his body were mild burns. So how did he die? The real truth wasn't unearthed until his autopsy, which uncovered a tiny, precise burn mark at the very tip of his, well, nether regions, let's say. From there, the whole embarrassing story was able to be put together. This dim-witted soul was having a very boozy night out when he needed to empty his bladder. Without thinking, he unzipped and peed over a rail track he thought was out of service. But it turned out to be active. 600 volts of electricity shot up his urine stream right into the nards, causing a severe and indeed fatal electric shock. This might have to be one of the worst ways to go. Not in terms of pain, but embarrassment. Driving while distracted is always a risk, and for one Colorado lady back in 1996, her distraction of choice was touching up her makeup in the rearview mirror. But a sudden car swerving up ahead caused her to brake so sharply that the lipstick she had been applying flew out of her hand and straight into her mouth. The lethal lipstick lodged in her windpipe, and she choked to death before anyone could come to her assistance. Well, they do say beauty is pain, or something. Maybe beauty is also death? I don't know, I'll ask my neighborhood goth. Psst, if you happen to have any Darwin Awards stories of your own, shoot us an email at stories@bmas.com for the chance to get featured in an upcoming episode. Okay, now back to it. Across the world, deep-fried locusts are a delicacy, but they were responsible for the death of one farmer back in 2008. These suckers are also known as sky prawns, probably because that sounds slightly more appetizing than locust. And in February of that year, the UAE saw swarms of them invade the country, the worst seen in 50 years. The swarms were so bad that the nation's crops started becoming at risk from these hungry critters. So one farmer decided to fight fire with fire. The locusts were eating his crops? Well, he'd eat the locusts right back. Sorry, sky prawns. Some questionable logic there, but this heroic harvester ate and ate and ate, until he started to feel a little sick. You might chalk that up to the fact that he'd just been chowing down on some bugs, but in actuality, as well as a hefty amount of protein, this farmer had also ingested a totally toxic dose of insecticide. Since the locusts had been ravaging his fields, which had been sprayed with the stuff, it meant that by eating the locusts, he had also consumed the poison. Within a few hours of his bug binge, the farmer had become blind and paralyzed, and soon after that, he was dead. Would it really have been so hard to just eat a cheeseburger instead? Death by hot dog. Now that's something you don't hear every day, but you're about to. At a convenience store in Missouri, a clerk told a noisy and disruptive customer that if he didn't leave, she was going to call the cops. His response? Running out with a pilfered hot dog in hand. Cops soon arrived to the scene, and they didn't have to look far to find this felon, as he was lying on the sidewalk only a few feet from the doors, having choked to death on the 6-inch glizzy still wedged in his throat. In 1997, a group of co-workers in Holland were on a tour bus, and some of the Boulder employees stuck their heads out of the windows to enjoy the air. The driver repeatedly told them to keep their heads inside, but they didn't listen, and they paid the price. You think you'd notice a major obstacle approaching down the road, but two men kept their heads out as the bus entered a tunnel, and by this point, it was too late. The two men were not decapitated, but suffered severe head trauma and snapped necks, killing them both instantly. Way to ruin the field trip, guys. Fastest human can run over 27 miles per hour, but that's only after accelerating during a run-up. A Dutch teenager in 2004 thought he could do better than that, and got close to that speed straight away. In a bid to impress his friends, he set his car to cruise control at 20 miles per hour and told them he was gonna jump out and run alongside the car before jumping back in and driving away. But his shocked friends could only look on as he stepped out of the moving car and immediately smashed his head on the asphalt. He died the following day. You can call that a catastrophically stupid idea. If you've ever been told you run your mouth too much, don't worry. You ain't got nothing on the man who smack-talked himself back to the gallows. In 1825, a group of political dissidents rebelled against the Russian Empire, but their revolution wasn't exactly successful, and as a result, many of the revolutionaries were rounded up and executed, including Kondraty Ryleyev. Kondraty was about to be hanged, but in a stroke of pure luck, when the trapdoor below opened and he fell through, his rope snapped. This was reportedly seen as divine intervention from God, and so Kondraty was set free. And yet, Kondraty just couldn't help himself. As he left, he remarked, "In Russia, they can't even make rope properly." Ah, brother. How hard is it to just keep your mouth shut? Kondraty was a free man for a whole day before the Tsar reportedly caught wind of the insult, tore up the pardon, and hanged him again. And this time, he made sure that it was for real. Looks like Russia is capable of making rope properly after all. Victoria Falls should be named Michael Falls after this totally preventable death. See, 50-year-old Michael was a clever man. Not only was he a college headmaster, he was also a respected geography lecturer on the conferences circuit, which is why he should have known that giant waterfalls equal dangerous. While on a trip to the Victoria Falls between Zimbabwe and Zambia in Africa, he was happily taking photos of his girlfriend when he dropped his glasses over the edge. Thinking he wouldn't be able to enjoy the view of the glorious Victoria Falls without them, he attempted to scale down the side of the 260-foot gorge to retrieve his specs. But as you can imagine, the side of a waterfall is gonna be extremely slippery. Halfway down, Michael slipped and fell 130 feet to his death. The most French way to go of all, dying in the throes of passion. While riding the love train one night, Jean-Louis Toubon chowed down on his lover's edible underwear. Only it didn't go exactly to plan when he started choking. Now, edible underwear are kinda exactly what they sound like. Some iterations of these digestible drawers are made from an edible film that was originally designed to wrap frozen turkeys. Others are more like candy necklaces made of string and candy beads. Whatever kind Jean-Louis swallowed, they clearly went down the wrong pipe. Immediately, paramedics were called to the paramour's aid, but tragically, they couldn't remove the rogue undies from his throat in time. Seems like the mood wasn't the only thing that got killed. In the summer of 2011, 55-year-old Philip A. Contos attended a protest against New York State's motorcycle helmet requirement, and ironically would become the poster child for wearing a helmet. Around 550 motorcycle enthusiasts rode together without their helmets in a show of solidarity against the safety law. During the demonstration, Contos' motorbike fishtailed when he hit the brakes, and he was thrown over the handlebars. He hit his head on the pavement and was pronounced dead at the hospital. The medical expert who pronounced Contos dead asserted he would have undoubtedly survived the accident if he had been wearing a helmet. Abate, the organization that sponsored the ride, maintained their view that motorcyclists should have a choice of whether or not to wear a helmet. Talk about ironic. Gary Banning from North Carolina was at his friend's house when he spotted a mysterious jar of tasty-looking liquid. Assuming it was alcohol and without bothering to check, he flipped off the lid and started to drink it. But he soon discovered it wasn't alcohol at all, but a jar of gasoline. The shock of chugging gasoline was too much for Gary, so he spat it out. Then he tried to calm down with a cigarette. As soon as he lit it, he caught fire and died the next day from his injuries. Later in the video, we'll look at some people who died from actual alcohol-related stupidity, which, if you can believe it, led to some even stupider demises. One defense lawyer went above and beyond for his client in an absolutely insane courtroom incident, and it cost him big time. In an Ohio courtroom in July 1871, lawyer Clement Vallandigham argued that his client, Thomas McGahan, was innocent. McGahan was accused of killing a man named Tom Myers during a bar fight, but Vallandigham maintained that Myers accidentally ended himself with his own pistol. To prove it, the lawyer used an unloaded gun to demonstrate to the jury how Myers could have done this. The previous evening, the lawyer had set a loaded pistol next to the unloaded one on a table at his hotel. In the process of demonstrating to fellow lawyers how Myers may have blasted himself, Vallandigham picked up the loaded gun from the table and also blasted himself in the abdomen. For real. He was mortally wounded. But his demonstration apparently worked, and McGahan was acquitted. Because after all, he had proven it was possible for Tom Myers to have fatally capped himself by accident. Unfortunately, only 4 years after his acquittal, McGahan died in a saloon shooting not unlike the one Vallandigham had gotten him off for. So you can argue that Vallandigham's sacrifice was for nothing. While driving home one night, a couple in a car were having a snippy conversation. The man said, "I feel like you don't love me." At the same time, further down the road, some young men were pulling down their pants and mooning passing cars. The couple in the car drove nearer. The woman in the passenger seat responded, "I do love you, really." The man said, "I sense a butt coming." At that moment, the distracted driver collided with one of the men, pants down, bare buttocks to the wind. Get it? I sense a butt coming? Like a butt. Yeah, okay, unfunny jokes aside, this was a real situation that happened in 2004. Apart from the conversation, of course. The young British man in question had been flashing passing motorists alongside some friends on their way to a party, when a swerving car lost control and collided with him, bumper to rump. Dying with your pants down around your ankles has to be a real rock bottom. Some people will go to great lengths to impress their friends, which can go explosively wrong. In 2017, Alexander Sasha Chechik from Russia pulled the pin out of a hand grenade whilst in his car and shared photographs of himself holding it to his girlfriend, probably as a way to show off his balls of steel. Unfortunately, despite his apparent plans, the guy didn't manage to insert the hand grenade pin back in. The pin is of course just the safety mechanism. It's actually the lever on the side which initiates the grenade's timed explosion when released. However, it's still not worth risking it by removing the pin, as is obvious in the fact that this dude accidentally released the lever and blew himself to smithereens. And in a very possible all-time peak of human stupidity, the police, when interviewed about the incident later, revealed that they believed this dingus thought it wouldn't explode as long as he didn't throw it. In 2017, 2 United States Navy pilots got a little too carried away when they decided to completely abandon safety regulations to perform daredevilish stunts in their plane, reaching astonishing speeds while flying as low as 210 feet, a good 300 feet below their minimum permitted altitude. Things were bound to take a downward turn as they swapped controls back and forth. Descending too low and slow, one of the pilots traded off controls to his co-pilot, but it was too late. The T-45C Goshawk crashed before they could safely eject themselves. Ironically, these adventuring aviators had actually been on their way back from a week-long naval event, which included low-altitude awareness training. You can't make this stuff up. Instructing pilot Lieutenant Birch was fond of the phrase, "There are old pilots and there are bold pilots." He failed to mention there are also outrageously dumb ones in that latter category. While snails are a common delicacy across the world, there's a reason you don't often see slugs on the same menus. A rugby player called Sam from Sydney, Australia, was at a party in 2010 when a slug crawled across the table. His friends dared him to eat it, and he did. But not long afterwards, it became evident that Sam had contracted a rat lungworm, a parasitic worm carried by rodents and evidently slugs. Then, in a rare and tragic twist, the parasite infested Sam's brain, putting him in a coma and leaving him paralyzed. 8 years later, he died as a result of this prank gone wrong. I'm not sure I even have to tell you this, folks, but seriously, don't eat slugs. Of all the dangerous foods in the world, I'm sure most people would rank toast pretty low on that list. Yet mere toasted bread caused the death of a UK man back in 2012. The unfortunate fella in question had a laundry list of ailments, including kidney failure and a rare disease called cystinosis that caused him to go blind. Most recently, he'd been hospitalized for delayed swallowing reflex, which means a person can't automatically swallow and risks serious choking. As a result, as he recovered in hospital, Martin was on a strict soft foods only diet, made up of stuff like yogurt and pureed vegetables. But very quickly, he grew fed up of this way of eating. Despite the soft food sign over his head, he started complaining to the nurses and insisting that they give him some toast. At first, the nurses held firm. But after Martin kept bugging them, eventually they relented and served him some toast. For 5 days, this new addition to his diet seemed to go off without a hitch. Until the 6th day, when Martin tucked into his toast unsupervised and some bread got stuck in his airway. By the time the medics arrived to save him, he had stopped breathing and tragically died. Toast is a final meal. I would have at least gone out with a bang with some lobster rolls. Thomas May was an English poet who loved eating almost as much as he liked poetry. As a result, old Tommy packed on some poundage, so much so that he took to holding up his multiple chins using strips of fabric. But as well as eating, Thomas also liked to drink. And one night he got so fantastically wasted that he forgot to take off the chin-strapping strips of fabric before he went to bed, and accidentally strangled himself to death in his sleep. A dignified death for an equally dignified man. Desperation can drive us all to do stupid things, although I can't say I've ever blown myself up before. Giancarlo Baramti was a shop owner in Milan who was getting fed up with thieves breaking into his store. After the 10th break-in, he took matters into his own vigilante hands by setting up a security system like no other, a makeshift bomb in the doorway. In fact, this security system was so successful that Giancarlo proved its effectiveness when he forgot to disarm it one day in 1992 and blew himself to bits. Sounds like it's got a 100% success rate to me. There are smart ways to save money, and there are dumb ways to save money. And then there's this guy. Mr. Zhang was visiting Ningbo Younger Zoo in China with his family when he realized he couldn't afford the $20 to buy a ticket for himself. Instead of just taking the L and meeting his family at home, he decided to break in. He doubled back and scaled 2 10-foot walls and then another barbed wire fence to get in. If only Mr. Zhang had been Mr. Genius, then he would have maybe realized that the reason there were so many fences is because the part of the zoo he had broken into was the tiger enclosure. Immediately, a trio of tigers terrifyingly jumped on him and quickly ripped him to pieces. I guess the price of his life was worth less than that $20 ticket? Unless you've got ET in your basket, you probably shouldn't be cycling on an airport runway. This advice never reached Brazilian cyclist Marcelo, who was crossing an airfield near Sao Paulo while listening to his Walkman. Yes, it was 1997, but that's no excuse. The 25-year-old was totally clueless as he collided with the propeller of a landing plane, mangling the blades and damaging the wing in the process. I'd usually say, wear a helmet, folks, but in this case, I'm not sure that would have helped. Claustrophobes, look away for this next one. A man had been out drinking with some work colleagues and decided that instead of spending $10 on a taxi, he would sleep off the alcohol in the trunk of his car. While he may have been trying to avoid getting caught car sleeping to dodge any trouble with local cops, the decision would cost him much more dearly than just a fine. While nestled in the trunk, his keys, which had an automatic clicker to open his lock, slipped out of reach. He was trapped. Frantically, he tried to claw his way out, but it was in vain. And by the time police finally opened up the trunk 14 hours later, he was dead from asphyxiation. Turns out fresh air runs out pretty quickly when you're locked in the trunk. Who'd have thunk? Unfortunately, this man wouldn't be the only victim of a car lock-in. So stay tuned to see how a fellow car captive met an even more extreme end. We've all heard stories of idiots playing Russian roulette, but this one might just top them all. In 1999, Cambodia was littered with all kinds of discarded weaponry after decades of armed conflict. In a place called Svay Rieng, 3 friends had spent the evening drinking. Several hours in, one of the men pulled out a 25-year-old unexploded tank mine he'd found in his backyard. The man then tossed it under the table, and the 3 drunken morons began taking turns to first drink, then stomp on the mine. Other villagers fled in terror, and minutes later, an enormous explosion occurred, killing all 3 men. Personally, I think the gene pool might have benefited from this one. Don't you? This next Darwin Award winner took What Would Jesus Do to a new and fatal level. See, the period of Lent leading up to Easter symbolizes Jesus wandering around the desert for 40 days and nights without any food or water. As a result, many people will give up things like chocolate or texting their exes for Lent. For 34-year-old Rosalind Gilbert, she decided to take this period of abstinence one step further by being exactly like Jesus and giving up food altogether. She also opted to barely drink any water along the way. Now, I'm not sure I need to tell you that going 40 days without food or proper hydration is a one-way ticket to those pearly gates. While it's thought the human body, in some cases, can survive 2 or 3 months without food, if you start messing with your water intake as well, that expected survival time cuts right down to a matter of weeks, if not days. Before long, with the body deprived of the energy and moisture it needs to function properly, organs quickly begin shutting down. For Rosalind, she got to 23 days only sustaining off water and the Word of God before tragically she died of starvation. This story has just affirmed to me that I do need some fries with that, actually, and make them large. And yes, I'll have cheese sauce. 2 bored comrades in a Romanian aluminum factory decided to have some fun with an air hose, usually used for industrial machinery. When blowing dust off their clothes got old, they cranked things up a notch and decided to remove their clothes entirely. Things quickly moved below the belt when one of the guys decided he was going to see what happened when he pumped 6 bars of atmospheric pressure into his rear end. For context, that's more than double what car tires are normally pumped to. Now, I don't know what bro thought was going to happen by pumping that much pressure into his butt, but not only did he break employment regulations, he also broke right through his intestinal tract, and he died within minutes from severe internal hemorrhaging. There's nothing worse than a beach day with bad weather. Oh, wait, there is one thing worse: getting buried alive in sand. Unfortunately for Daniel Jones in 1997, he got both. While on vacation with his girlfriend at the Outer Banks in North Carolina, Daniel got bothered by strong winds at the beach. He decided to dig a hole in the sand, apparently so he could get his tan on out of the way of the elements passing overhead. Sound logic, right? Well, not so much. See, digging an 8-foot deep hole only 25 feet from the high tide mark was a recipe for disaster. Sure enough, once he dug his hole and set up his deck chair at the bottom, for real, ocean water started to seep through the deep sand. The hole gave way, and within seconds, Daniel was completely swallowed by sand. It took an hour for rescue workers and fellow beachgoers to dig Daniel out, but despite best efforts, by the time they did, he had tragically suffocated to death. Lesson learned: do all your sunbathing above sea level, folks. In 1996, Mark Gleason made a last-ditch effort to quiet his snoring so his girlfriend could sleep. Doctors had told Gleason that his snoring, which was caused by sinus problems from a car accident, was incurable. But the Scottish couple were determined to get it under control. After taking a few sleeping pills and drinking some wine, Gleason stuffed tampons into his nostrils. He fell asleep on his girlfriend's sofa, and the next morning, she discovered his lifeless body. Gleason died from asphyxiation caused by both the tampons and the sleeping pills, which furthered his breathing difficulties. Dude was literally snored to death. Walter Hallis from Leeds, England, had a lifelong fear of the dentist, so much so that when he got a severe toothache, he was too petrified to get it checked out by a professional. His solution? Get a friend to punch out the tooth for him. The sage wisdom of men never ceases to amaze me. Unfortunately, his friend clearly had some repressed anger because the punch was so powerful it knocked Walter clean off his feet. And when he fell, he fractured his skull on the concrete floor. 6 days later, Walter died in hospital from a brain bleed. All just to avoid some passive-aggressive comments about not flossing enough. Bathing can be a risky business, from slipping in the shower to drowning in the bathtub to dying of shock? At least that's how Patrick Burke met his end in 1903, who died in hospital not from a bacterial infection or a surgery gone wrong, but because he'd been given his first bath in years. In the autopsy report, Patrick's death is cited as being the result of injuries sustained from scrubbing, a chill caught while wet, and shock at being clean, which is a kind way of saying, bro reeked. The next time you're debating doing some DIY around the house, let the story of Hans Pender be a cautionary tale. In 1985, a 50-year-old Austrian decided his Salzburg home needed some redecorating, and so he took it upon himself to apply some wallpaper. But he quickly learned that there was a reason people normally called in professionals for this kind of thing, when he became entangled in an 80-foot roll of cloth wallpaper. By the time his family returned home, Hans was totally wrapped in the glue-coated paper and had actually suffocated to death in it. If that's not a sign to just paint your darn walls, I don't know what is. Texan shop owner Michael was an alcoholic, but not an ordinary one. Due to a painful throat condition, he couldn't drink through his mouth. This meant he had to find other ways to consume his liquor, and his wife said he soon became addicted to enemas, essentially sticking the liquid where the sun don't shine. Yeah, seriously. Enemas are typically used by people to relieve constipation or prepare for a procedure. But another not-so-medical reason is alcohol, known in scholarly circles as butt chugging, or a backdoor keg stand. This method of imbibing booze is far more dangerous, as alcohol is absorbed directly through the capillaries in the rectum, which leads to faster intoxication. So one night, Michael wanted to get blind drunk and decided the only way to do it was to pour 100 fluid ounces of sherry up his rear end. What he didn't know was that after he'd passed out, the alcohol kept absorbing, and he was dead by the morning. The toxicology report stated he had a blood alcohol level of 0.47%, meaning he'd pretty much embalmed himself. For comparison, a blood alcohol concentration of 0.08 is defined as legal intoxication, so 0.47 is insanely high. Even so, something tells me the age-old tradition of butt chugging will continue on regardless. Some inventors dedicate their life towards their pursuits, and the fella up next literally gave his life in the name of advancing technology, though not intentionally. Francis Bacon was an English philosopher who was around during the 16th and 17th centuries, when food was mostly preserved using methods like drying, salting, or smoking. But on one snowy night, Francis looked through his bedroom window and wondered if ice might be another way of preserving food. Now, Francis was guided by the scientific method, aka a philosophical method of acquiring knowledge through observation and testing. Nerd! I know, right? Who acquires knowledge? Ugh. Anyway, this meant it wasn't good enough just to hypothesize. Our guy had to prove it. During a snowstorm, Francis went outside and retrieved a chicken, had it killed and disemboweled, then stuffed it with snow to see if the ice would preserve it. While the chicken likely stayed somewhat fresh, unfortunately, this method did not preserve Francis himself, as this chilly snowstorm study meant he fatally contracted pneumonia and died not long after. You can't say that Francis wasn't dedicated to his craft, and it's because of his sacrifice that we have refrigerators today. So while it's still a pretty dumb way to die, whenever I help myself to a fresh chilled pickle, I'll send one up to Big Man Bacon in the sky. You wouldn't imagine chickens to be particularly formidable foes, but an incident in 2002 proved that they're not birds to be ruffled with. Arnel Torres was a 47-year-old Filipino man who moonlighted as a sentenciador, a cockfight referee. Cockfights, by the way, are where two roosters bred for aggression are put in a ring to fight claw and beak until one of them kicks the bucket. Yeah, it's pretty messed up. If you've ever looked at a chicken's feet, you know they have some pretty gnarly claws anyway. But often, long metal talons are attached as well to up the ante. In Philippine cockfighting rings, these talons are known as tari blades, probably because they are freaking terrifying to behold. Arnel was sentenciadoring, sorry, I just love that word, a charity cockfight in San Pedro in May 2004, which was set to raise funds for a deceased neighbor. Ironically, this cockfight would result in another deceased neighbor. During the fight, Arnel noticed that one of the cock's taris had come loose, so he went to go adjust it. But as I mentioned, these rowdy roosters had been bred specially for aggression, so when Arnel approached it, it went berserk and attacked him. Ordinarily, a cheesed-off chicken can be booted away, but armed with its blades, this rooster proved a lethal opponent. And one of the taris actually cut through Arnel's chest right into his heart. Tragically, Arnel bled to death. And as retribution for the passing of their family member, Arnel's family got revenge by chopping the clucking criminal into pieces. And they also announced yet another charity cockfight in his memory, with another neighbor serving as sentenciador. Just kidding. In the spooky world of voodoo in Haiti, witch doctor Jacques Sauvage made his living selling a unique product, magic bullets, which were advertised to always hit their targets. But the thing with making a claim like that is that you've got a lot to answer for if the bullets aren't as bullseye as promised. And in 1992, that answer came in the form of an angry customer whose intended victim had survived. The infuriated customer fired at Jacques with another of Jacques' very own magic bullets. And this time, the bullet hit its mark. Pretty rough to be killed with your own creation, but I guess that's what you get selling implements of death to crazy people. If only Jacques had also sold magic vests. A treasure hunting game turned deadly in 2017 when a geocache became a geo-flash flood. Described as the world's largest treasure hunt, geocaching is where people follow clues based on GPS coordinates to find small treasure boxes, known as geocaches, hidden in their area. Sounds like harmless fun, until someone decides to head down a flooded waterway in search of trinkets. When meteorologists warned the Czech Republic of impending rainstorms, most people paid attention. But not this group of geocachers, who thought it would be the perfect time to climb into an underground waterworks tunnel. Sure enough, heavy rain hit the city in the afternoon, causing flash floods across the country, including in the sewers, which swelled and carried the geo-junkies out into the Vltava River. Although 2 members of the group survived, 2 others were swept away and tragically drowned. Considering the geocaches aren't even real treasures, often just logbooks to write your name in to prove you found it, I wouldn't say it was worth it. You know how you're never meant to leave babies or dogs in locked cars? Well, you should never leave your friends in one either. When Andrew, a British man on vacation in Marbella, Spain, went out on the town, he was on a mission to get real wasted. After he and his pals returned to their hotel in the wee hours of the morning, Andrew was so sloshed, his friend made the unusual choice to leave him in the car to sober up. But little did the friend know, that month was set to be one of Marbella's hottest. Air temperatures rapidly skyrocketed to over 80 degrees. And with no ventilation in the locked car, the sun streaming through the windows would have risen temps as high as 120 degrees. All while Andrew was completely KO'd by his excessive booze intake. Suffice to say, by the afternoon when Andrew was found, he had died of heat stroke and acute alcohol poisoning. Why they thought leaving their drunk friend in a locked car in a hot country was the responsible thing to do is beyond me. But consider this a PSA. If your friend is too drunk, just buy them some French fries instead. In 2004, a 61-year-old named Richard was trying to torch some old garden clippings in the back of his yard when he was seized by a particularly bad idea. Richard decided that the best kind of fire starter wasn't kindling or paper, but paint thinner. Now, paint thinner is so flammable that even its fumes are dangerous. And sure enough, the vapor from the container of the paint thinner he was holding ignited, causing a huge explosion. Richard was engulfed in a ball of flames, suffering third-degree burns and later passing away in hospital. Who knew gardening could be so action-packed? One day in 2008, a young Florida man named Cameron Bieberly took a joyride in a shopping cart that was attached to the bumper of a car. When the car hit a speed bump, the Floridian was catapulted 27 feet and landed on his head when he hit the pavement. He died shortly after. Bieberly's parents became adamant campaigners against car surfing, an insanely stupid trend where people ride on the outside of a moving car, either by holding on to the outside of the car or by riding on an object being pulled by the car. Apparently, a growing number of today's adolescents and young adults need to be shown evidence of a tragedy to avoid dangerous driving behaviors that could kill them. I'm sure all of us have at least one box of keepsakes we never look at kicking around in our houses somewhere. But 70-year-old Eleanor Barry took this to a new level. Her Long Island home was filled from the floor to the ceiling with towers of books, newspapers, and scrapbooks. If she'd lived in the 2000s, she would have definitely featured on the show Hoarders. But one day in December 1977, neighbors noticed they hadn't seen Eleanor in a few weeks, and so police arrived to the scene. To get in through the front door, they had to use an axe to smash it down because the entrance was blocked with some collapsed towers of Eleanor's hoard. Once they'd battled their way through, they found her lying beneath a pile of books, newspapers, and press clippings in her bedroom that had collapsed on top of her. As it turned out, the weight of the papers had muffled her cries for help, so if it hadn't been for her concerned neighbors, she wouldn't have been found in time. She was rescued from the heap alive, but died shortly afterwards from her injuries. Kinda tragic, but at least she wasn't just left there to become a permanent part of her antiques collection, right? Kalita Hicks was driving her 1986 T-Top Monte Carlo along a dark Kentucky highway at 3 a.m. back in August 2010. She had a passenger named Thomas May with her, and they decided to switch seats, though they apparently saw no need to pull over. As Hicks attempted to climb out the window, over the T-Top's roof and into the passenger seat, her foot hit the steering wheel, causing the car to veer to the left. May grabbed the steering wheel and turned it sharply to the right. The swerving caused Hicks to be thrown from the roof of the car. She hit her head on the guardrail as she landed on the pavement. Hicks was flown to the University of Kentucky Medical Center and died during surgery. Well, some accidents call for preventative action to be taken in future, but I just don't think you can ever prepare for a stupid decision of that magnitude. If this isn't an example of you shoulda known better, I don't know what is. In Washington in 2010, during the American Sprint Car Series, 2 crew members dreamed up an insane thrill ride. They poured 4 gallons of methanol into a 55-gallon barrel, sat on the barrel, then lit the bunghole. These 2 bright sparks thought the barrel would shoot across the parking lot like a rocket in some kind of fiery rodeo. What they'd actually created was a makeshift bomb, which quickly blew them sky high. Both men ended up in hospital, and one of them died. Let me reiterate, these weren't just regular Joes, but racing crew members, who presumably had some mechanical engineering capabilities. This is why they're eligible for a Darwin Award, because how the heck they thought this was a good idea is totally beyond me. Not sure I want to think about the aftermath between their legs. Now this might be the craziest Darwin Award story I've ever heard. In 1995, a group of Polish men decided to measure their masculinity, and evidently their intelligence, or lack thereof, by playing some drinking games. At first, they all stripped naked and hit each other over the head with frozen rutabagas. Because, well, how else are you supposed to prove that you're a man? Man, I feel like there's a real excess of dudes getting naked in today's episode. I'm sorry, folks. Anyway, when that got old, one of the competitors amputated the end of his foot using a chainsaw. 30-year-old farmer Krzysztof Asninski swung the chainsaw toward his neck and cut his own head off. Well, at least we know who the most macho man is. Drinking games usually never lead anywhere good, but when it comes to winning the award for collective inebriated stupidity, this one's a no-brainer. Get it? Right before she fell down the stairs, Samantha Taylor was in high spirits. And by that I mean she'd been quaffing vodka mixed with orange juice as well as several cans of beer. The 33-year-old British woman had just received her divorce papers in the mail that morning, finalizing her separation from her ex-husband that meant she could finally marry her new boyfriend. The happy couple had moved into a new house and were busy decorating it, meaning their house was full of paintbrushes and stepladders, and loose nails. On what should have been the happiest day of her life, a tipsy Samantha stepped on a nail while walking up the stairs of their house and fell backwards, hitting her head against the floor and falling unconscious. Despite being immediately taken to hospital, Samantha tragically never woke up. The lesson? If you're gonna celebrate around an active work site, I'd do it sober. There are few things more satisfying than when bullies get what they deserve, especially big ones. Cambodian military policeman Kim Sakhorn, nicknamed Big Giant, got exactly that when he tried to extort money and substances from a local dealer. To scare the dealer, Kim pulled the pin from a grenade. Unsurprisingly, this tactic worked, and the dealer handed over the goods. Kim then put the live grenade back in his pocket, forgetting to put the pin back in. Did it ever cross Kim's mind how dumb this was? The badge-bearing swindler swaggered back to his motorcycle, proud of a job well done, and hauled his huge heft onto the seat of the motorcycle, sitting right down on the live grenade in his pants, causing the ignition lever to be triggered. The grenade exploded, blasting the Big Giant into tiny little pieces. If you enjoyed this, check out the video linked on screen. And remember, email me at stories@beamazed.com if you've got a Darwin Award-worthy story to share. Thanks for watching and see you next time.